Just a few hours ago, a terrorist in the Israeli city of Hadera ran around stabbing people. Police killed him and ended the stabbing spree. The terrorist was one of many radical Islamists who had been indoctrinated with radical ideology and who made it their life mission to murder Jewish people. They believe that it is their religious duty and brings them closer to Allah, that in heaven they shall have 72 virgins escorting them. Last week, civilians in Jaffa were murdered in cold blood, this week in Beersheba, and now in Hadera. On the Hezbollah front, the Hezbollah is suddenly hinting that it wants a ceasefire. After an entire year of trying to murder Israelis, both Arab and Jewish, firing 13,000 Iranian rockets, missiles, and drones at them on a daily basis, the deputy of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, said, after the issue of a ceasefire takes shape and once diplomacy can achieve it, all of the other details can be discussed, thereby suggesting that the terrorist organization is ready indeed for a ceasefire. What changed? Israel first took out thousands of terrorists, including leader Nasrallah himself and Nasrallah's replacement, and the replacement of his replacement. Simultaneously, Israel's soldiers are finding and destroying dozens of Hezbollah tunnels along the Lebanese border with Israel, filled with weapons and equipment in preparation to carry out the Hezbollah version of October 7th in the north of Israel. The U.S. State Department spokesperson said it best. Obviously, we don't trust the Hezbollah. He clarified that Hezbollah's ceasefire offer is meaningless without it disarming and withdrawing from Israel's border, per the UN Security Council Resolution 1701, and added that Hezbollah's ceasefire talk shows that Israel is being successful in actually weakening it. It is absolutely heartwarming that the Hezbollah is all of a sudden interested in a ceasefire after incessant bombardment of Israeli civilians for almost an entire year, including right now. But with all respect, it is not as if they're suddenly interested in peace. They did, after all, knowingly fire at a soccer field in an Arabic-speaking village in the north of the country, murdering 12 innocent children and wounding many more. What they're really interested is simply not ending up like the Hamas. What Israel is doing in the south of Lebanon is to push away the Hezbollah in self-defense, just like it said it would, so that 60,000 Israeli civilians, both Jewish and Arab, who had been evacuated from their homes, can go back home in safety. Lebanon's Christians, Druze, and Sunnis hate the Hezbollah, a Shiite arm, I remind you, of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Actually, the Lebanese remember Hezbollah's assassination of their former prime minister, Rafiq Hariri. They also remember Hezbollah dragging them into a war with Israel in 2006, using Lebanon as a platform from which to attack Israel. Rather than protecting Lebanon, as Hezbollah claims it does, the terror group actually endangers its civilians and uses them as human shields. This is actually an amazing opportunity for Lebanon to regain its sovereignty and independence from this murderous Hezbollah stronghold, after it having oppressed the Lebanese people themselves for decades. 2 days ago was the one-year anniversary since the Hamas massacre of October 7th. At 11 a.m., Tel Aviv was fired on from the south by Hamas in Gaza. At 5:45 p.m., Tel Aviv was fired on from the east by the Houthis in Yemen. At 11:15 p.m., Tel Aviv was fired on from the north by Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel is not in a war with Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis. Israel is under attack from the Islamic Republic of Iran's terror branch in Gaza, its terror army in Lebanon, and its terror pirates in Yemen. It is also under attack from the Palestinian agents of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and from its Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq. And above all that, Israel is under attack from Iran's regime itself directly, which has fired hundreds of missiles and drones from Iranian soil. Now, let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
We have an update. Unfortunately, there has been a Hezbollah rocket attack in Kiryat Shmona along Israel's northern border, and Israeli emergency services have declared the death of a man and a woman in their 40s. Would you have any comment about that in addition to the other attacks and what this means for the future of the war?
First of all, my heart breaks, and I'm sending my condolences to the poor families whose loved ones had been killed. This again just emphasizes how recklessly and indiscriminately the Hezbollah is shooting at Israeli civilians, how the Islamic Republic of Iran is trying to demonize Israel, attack its civilians day in, day out in order to weaken Israel, weaken the civilian strength, the resilience, and to actually allow the world to be focused here instead of on its rampage on getting nuclear power. However, we must be united, we must be strong, and we must go on and not allow the Hezbollah or the Houthis or the Iranian Republic and regime or the Hamas to break our spirit.
We have a number of questions about UNIFIL. Could you say a word about them? And specifically, we have a question about the Irish Prime Minister boasting that the Irish forces in UNIFIL have not left the border area. Could you please comment on that? We have a number of questions about UNIFIL, and specifically the Irish forces that have refused to leave the border area, as being reported by the Irish government. Do you have any comments about that and perhaps an explanation about UNIFIL?
UNIFIL is a UN peacekeeping force that had been established for the sole purpose of making sure the 2 UN resolutions that had been decided almost 16 years ago, in fact, actually, I correct myself, 18 years ago, in order to make sure 2 things happen. One, that the Hezbollah, the designated terrorist organization, does not come close to the Israeli border. And the second thing, that they will be disarmed. First of all, there is an absolute failure by UNIFIL to do those 2 things, because the Hezbollah were armed and were using those arms against Israel, but also they did not only not move from the Israeli border, they came closer to the Israeli border, and they were literally on top of the Israeli border. So the UNIFIL force, the peacekeeping force, did not keep peace, nor did it actually do what it was meant to do. And the fact that the Irish government actually puts its own civilians, its own soldiers in this UNIFIL in danger after the IDF is protecting its own civilians from the Hezbollah, which UNIFIL did not prevent from being armed and did not prevent from coming closer. They're putting the Irish forces in danger because the Israeli army will retaliate. It has no choice but to retaliate. It's its responsibility to retaliate and to make sure Israeli civilians are safe. That's what the Irish government is saying. We actually support the Hezbollah. We will put our citizens in the place of danger, and we will do everything just in order not to listen to the IDF and to the Israeli government. No comment.
We have a question from Jane Tarzan, which asks, what's the trust test with Hezbollah, an entity that has spent decades wanting to destroy Israel?
My apologies. The question is, what is the?
What's the trust test? How can Israel be sure that Hezbollah will actually follow through on a ceasefire?
It's not by accident that I didn't hear, because the word trust and the word Hezbollah don't connect in my brain in the same sentence. They are so opposite to one another. They are an absolute antithesis of each other. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization like Hamas. There is no trust with a terrorist organization. Their objective, a declared objective, a stated objective, an overt, completely public objective, is to destroy the state of Israel, to harm, kill, carnage, massacre, rape the civilians of Israel. And therefore, no matter what they say, when they say it, and how they say it, they cannot be trusted. What needs to be done is make sure that they're moved away from the border so that they cannot do what they say plainly that they will do, and prevent them from having the capability to do it, which means disarm them and dismantle the infrastructure that they put in place next to the Israeli border in order to perpetrate those atrocities that they say they will do. Zero trust, no trust. No wonder I couldn't quite understand what you had asked. But there is no trust with the Hamas or with the Hezbollah. And to delve into the ideology and understand the mentality is to really understand how much there cannot be a trust in those organizations.
For our last question, Chuck Cheek asks, how can Israel improve its PR internationally?
The million-dollar question. Thank you. First of all, Israel does not put a lot of effort or enough effort into this very important tool. Next to the military capability, there needs to be also, perhaps not PR, but just an explanation, a kind of a narrative telling of what is going on here from our point of view, how people feel that they're displaced from their homes for over a year. What a traumatic experience the 7th of October really was for Israeli civilians and for the entire country, and how traumatized people really are. This is not being forwarded enough. It's not being passed on enough in any way since the establishment of the State of Israel. And it needs to be done. If not by the government, then at least on the civil level. But it needs to be done by perfectly English-speaking people, but also Arabists, people who speak the language, because the vast majority, if not all of the Arab world, doesn't get anything except what Al Jazeera and other networks that completely lie and tell a narrative that has little to do with the reality and the truth. They are the ones, the only ones that the Arab world hears. Very often in the Western world, only negative media is being heard, and therefore we have a need to have more speakers in Israel and abroad in order to pass the message. So thank you for asking that and for putting that on the table. And I dare you and challenge you to be that spokesperson out there as well. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for now. Thank you for tuning in. And of course, as always, we'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Israel time.